Welcome to another installment of Monday Q&A. I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend and you're looking forward to a great week. To everybody who submitted a question for this week's video, as always, thank you so much for your input. If you would like me to answer one of your questions on next week's video, simply put it in the comment section below. Until then, let's rip into this week's questions. I mentioned in passing on a few of my videos before that I like to place some foam beneath, say, the dead string length on a guitar or behind the springs on a guitar with the trem. For example, this PRS Custom 24, you can see I've got some foam underneath the strings and behind the nut on there. And then in the back plate, if you can see just underneath the springs, there's some little pieces of foam. I do that to stop kind of sympathetic vibrations that you get, say, behind the nut or with the trem springs. I will say, though, that I only do it on guitars where I've got the trem blocked. Like this particular guitar, I actually don't use the trem on it. I just tighten the strings right up. I basically use it like a hardtail guitar. But what I have noticed, especially if I'm trying to play super tight, chuggy stuff with a gate, that on this particular guitar, what was happening is the tremolo springs were sympathetically resonating and they'd be like triggering the gate, which I found super annoying. So that's what I like to do. I'm pretty sure these pieces of foam, you know when you buy like, I don't know, a pickup and it comes with a little foam ring. This is probably some foam from just like a Seymour Duncan pickup or something like that. I have no idea if foam and the material it's made from could interact with, say, the lacquer on your guitar. Might be something I want to look into, but I've had this on here for 6 or 7 years now and been totally fine. So I'd like to hear from all of you. Is this something you do to your guitars? I wouldn't do it if I had a guitar with an actual trem on there because, you know, I want to use the trem and not have the springs catch anything. And also that is sort of part of the tone on something like that. So the guitars that I would have a trem set up with, I'd be playing a different style with anyway. So I might not go with it. Eastman guitars. I have not had any direct experience playing one of them. But at the Melbourne Guitar Show, there was an Eastman booth, and I didn't really get a chance to go and play anything, but I did hear a bunch of people playing in there. There was this 12, 13-year-old kid absolutely ripping some jazz blues on one that sounded fantastic. It was kind of a nice change from just, you know, open E rock power chords or chug, chug, chug. So I did kind of just sit back and for 4 or 5 minutes watch this kid absolutely rip. I'd love to know who it is. If they were watching this video, that would be pretty wild, but for some reason I doubt that. Nevertheless, few of you I know have Eastman guitars. If you got one, let me know. What do you have? What do you like? What should I look out for? And it's something that I really would like to demo in the future on the channel. Speaking of the guitar show, any more highlights? If you haven't seen my vlog that I did about that long weekend, I'll put it at the end of the video so you can watch that one. But the main highlight for me was getting to meet a bunch of people, whether it's people who work for manufacturers that I've done some collaborations with over here through my channel. So people I know only from their email signature. It was kind of just great to meet them and hang out and talk about guitars and talk about non-guitar things as well. I really enjoyed that. Furthermore, it was great to run into a bunch of you, people who watch the channel, who went out of their way to come to my workshops or come to the gigs we did with Ragdoll or to just come up at the show and say hi and have a chat. I really, really enjoyed that. I had a great weekend and hopefully I can do it again next year. Thoughts and experiences playing multi-scale extended range guitars. I have a Music Man John Petrucci JP7, which I love, but I kind of wish it was multi-scale, especially on that low string because it does get a little bit floppy. I was first introduced to the multi-scale concept years ago at a little guitar show down in Fremantle where Perry Ormsby of Ormsby guitar fame had built his first multi-scale. He had a 6 and an 8 there. My initial thought there was that it was actually a lot easier and more comfortable to play than you would expect. I think it makes a lot of sense on 7 and 8 string guitars. For 6s, I think if you were playing multi-scale 7s and 8s mostly, then a multi-scale 6 is going to make a lot of sense. Otherwise, standard scale guitars still make pretty cool guitar noises. You know, there's a reason that design has persisted. But I think if I was playing music which really asked for a 7 or 8, I would immediately try and grab a really good multi-scale version of one of those. Just one, because it's a little bit more comfortable to play on a string that isn't super duper floppy on a 7 or an 8. And 2, I kind of like the tone as well. I've actually got a little video that I did a few years ago from the Strings Attached Guitar Festival playing a few Ormsby guitars, including some multi-scales as well that you can check out. We talked about Steve Farris from Mr. Mister last week, another session and sideman hero Daryl Sturmer. I'm probably most familiar with Daryl's work because they played on Easy Lover, the Philip Bailey, Phil Collins collaboration there, and I have had to learn that song to play live before. I love the guitar parts on it. I really like the sounds, and it's one of those things where that particular song is driven by such a cool hook and groove that the guitar really needs to slot in without, I guess, being too boring or too anemic. And I think that's a really great example of their guitar style. I haven't checked out a whole bunch of other stuff, but after looking at some of the credits that they've played on, it's like, oh, I know that song, and I know that song, and I know that song as well. It might be a good little idea for a video, sort of like, session heroes of the 70s and 80s. Let me know if you'd like to see that. You may not be able to tell from this particular angle that I film from all the time, but this is pretty much an open plan space that I'm in over here. And I've got two cats and live in a corner, and there's a door that's almost always open so the cats can go out into their cat run. So there's a lot of noises coming in from there. For me, it's less about getting hung up on distractions and more about just trying to work efficiently. I've got my desk with my audio interface and my Axe effects and my monitors on it. I've got my camera set up here all the time so that I can work quickly. The point there is that I'm probably going to get distracted. My life is basically one large distraction. I want to take a quick break and I want to go and play with the cats or pet the cats or, take a break and have lunch with my wife or just take a break in general. I can do that in this space, but it is set up so that if I go, hey, you know what? I really want to do that particular video right now, I can do that. I also tend to do a lot of my filming in chunks. For example, I'm filming this on a Monday and my wife is at work all day on a Monday. So I try to also work all day on a Monday so that I can minimize those distractions and so that during the week, I don't have to be as sort of on the clock as possible. So that sort of works for me. I understand that this is an outlier of a case here and that for a lot of other people, they may not have that opportunity. One thing which you might find handy is finding a space and setting aside a time, every single day or every single week if you want to sit down and practice or record some music, or even to find a space outside of the home if that's something that you're able to do, whether it's say once a week or once a month. You can go to a rehearsal space, crank up your amp for a few hours and just have a bunch of fun. That's a great way to get around some of those domestic distractions. Dimebag's guitar tone, is it great or is it garbage, basically? I think it's definitely great because it works in the context of Pantera. If you listen to Dime's isolated guitar, it's kind of doing the opposite of what everybody tells you you should do, which is, turn the mid-range up and turn the gain down. I love in Dime's case, it's like, nah, turn the gain up, scoop out the mids, hit the front with parametric EQs and graphic EQs, go to town, go hog wild and get something that doesn't sound like an overdriven 60s guitar tube amp, because Dimebag was playing in a band that had a very particular style, was going for a very particular sound. It's easy to take for granted that that Pantera sound Pantera kind of came up with, and it's become the standard for modern metal. But what I like so much about Dimebag's guitar tone, and what I didn't really get about it when I was younger, was the way it works with the rest of the band, Rex Brown's bass and Vinnie Paul's drumming, and the way it leaves space for Phil's vocals, the overall production. It's just a whole thing. I don't think you can separate the guitar sound in isolation from what Pantera were able to do. And one thing that I mentioned to so many people when they're trying to dial in tones, whether it's to record with or whether it's to play live, is go and find some of those isolated guitar tones and hear them out of context. Go and have a listen to Eddie Van Halen's isolated guitar, or find some isolated guitar tracks from some huge sounding guitar sounds, and you realize that so much of the sound is tailored to work in a mix with a band. So I think Dime's kind of like sledgehammer hitting concrete guitar sound works so well because the rest of the band kind of sounds like a sledgehammer hitting concrete. It's awesome. Double or triple tracking leads, is that something I've ever done? And would it be a good little idea for a video? I think it would be a good idea for a video. It's something that I haven't really done directly. I always just associate it so strongly with Randy Rhoads, especially the triple track thing. It sounds awesome. I know that's something that Zakk Wylde has talked about recreating as well in the studio. One thing that I kind of prefer is taking a lead. For example, if you go and have a listen to the guitar solo in the Ragdoll song Rust, and then selectively choosing phrases that you can either harmonize or play an octave higher or play an octave lower. So if you have a listen on headphones to that solo a few times, you'll hear some overdubs, some of which play particular lines an octave down, some play a minor third harmony on top, like a little diminished lick in there, some which just kind of play some different harmonies in there, an octave higher, that kind of thing. I kind of like that as a compositional and textural approach for a guitar solo, because rather than have to play the exact solo every single time, I can just kind of focus on getting one really good take that has a lot of energy, and then I can go and just kind of enhance it a little bit with some overdubs or some particular tones in there. Having said that, I'm trying to think of a solo that I could play well enough twice so that I could actually double track it. That might be a good little fun kind of studio tip video. Thanks for the suggestion. How do I feel about living in a country that is also a continent? It's a pretty good question. It does make Australia fairly unique that the entire landmass and the country happen to coincide. Australia also has a lot of overseas territories as well. So I guess you could kind of argue that, yeah, the continent is a country, but the country's actually slightly larger. Plus you've got Tasmania in there as well. Shout out to all the Tasmanians watching. So I think what a lot of people forget is how massive Australia is, where people will post up, say on my little tour vlogs, like, oh, you only did a few shows over East. What's that about? And they don't realize that Perth is pretty much where somewhere like San Diego is in the United States, and then everything on the East Coast would be like, you know, New York, the Carolinas, Florida. There's not a whole lot in between, I guess, until you hit Adelaide. Apologies to everyone in South Australia for saying that, you know, Adelaide's a bit of nowheresville. But kind of is, isn't it? Nevertheless, Australia's a massive place, so it does make touring incredibly difficult. That's one reason why, you know, when Ragdoll started touring, we actually toured the United States a whole bunch of times before we ever did an Australian tour. It was just so much more economically viable for us to go over there, and you don't have to drive as far to get to another big city and play in another large population center. So yeah, the other perception with Australia is that everything will kill you, when in reality, they don't want to kill you. They just want to give you a nice, big, warm, feathery or furry hug. And then that hug might last a little bit too long, and then you're in trouble. One last one for this week about ToneX. If you're a ToneX user, you can actually go on the ToneX cloud and download some captures that I've been making slowly. I actually have the ToneX pedal here. Big shout out to my buddy Kevin for that one. But I will have a video with it. I'm still just trying to build up a little library of captures of my own amps that I'm really happy with, and just kind of learning how the pedal works versus the software. It's a very interesting little ecosystem. I'm pulling some sounds that I really enjoy, and I want to put together a really comprehensive video on it. So let me know what you'd like to know about ToneX so that I can hopefully hit those points when I do a video. That's it for this week. I hope you all have a fantastic week. Again, if you've got questions that you would like me to answer, put them in the comment section below. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, my Patreon, the music that I make with Ragdoll, and a bunch of other links are in the video description so that you can support what I do here on the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.